Hi, I'm Trevor. Have you guys ever been given a list of jobs that you have to do and you have to do them in a certain order? Like putting the dishes in the dishwasher before you run it? Well, robots get those sorts of lists all the time. Today we're going to be learning how to program them to go through those lists step by step. Alright, so now we're going to learn how we can use something called a counter to try to enable us to do multiple things at once. So the idea of this is, let's say you have your robot driving around and you want to have it to, the moment you press a button, it'll immediately stop doing whatever it is. Now it would take a lot of work to put all over throughout your code, check the button, check the button, check the button, because then it would have to constantly be doing that, plus you're trying to do all the rest of your stuff. What we can do instead is we can try to break it up so that it will always check it. So what we'll be doing is something that we'll call a counter. So it'll keep track of where it's at in the program, and it'll do one part of the program, then it'll check, in this case, a button, and then it'll go back to the next part of the program, check the button, next part of the program, check the button. And so it'll keep moving back and forth like that. So that way we can try to keep track of where the robot's at in this process and always be looking at that button. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we need to do is create a variable that keeps track of where we are in the program. Now if you notice, I'm putting this outside of the loop. So we'll be running our code in this case in the loop, but our counter we need to keep outside of the loop, or at least the creation of it, because if we create it inside the loop, then every time through the loop, our counter will get set back to 0, which isn't what we want. Because what we're going to be doing with the counter is going to look something like this. For now, for our code, I just have it printing out to the screen, but you can go through and have it be whatever you want. But we check to see what the counter equals. So if counter is equal to 0, it'll run whatever code we put inside of here. So it'll go through, it'll print out thing, and change counter to 1. So then if we add the code for counter equal to 1, it'll then, the next time through the loop, it'll check counter equals 1. Now there's a couple of things I'll talk about for how the structure of this works. So we have our loop here. So initially counter equals 0. We enter the loop, counter equals 0. We check, does counter equal 0? It does. So we print this out and we change counter to 1. But notice how we have an else here. So it won't immediately check to see if counter is equal to 1 here. Instead, it'll exit out of all of the if statements and do whatever code we have down here. So in this case, we currently don't have anything else. So it'll go back through the loop. Counter is equal to 1, so it won't check this one because counter does not equal 0. Then it'll check here, counter equals 1, and it'll run this code, change counter, loop back around. So then if we were to add something like, in our case, now this will just be pseudocode, it won't actually work here, but if our button is pressed, we want to stop moving. The way it'll work is counter initially equals 0, so we enter in this loop, 0, we print out onto the screen, we change counter to 1, we don't do this part of the code, and then we check to see if the button's pressed. If the button's not pressed, then we loop back around to the top, counter is equal to 1, we do this part of the code, change counter, check if the button's pressed. So it'll just keep going through and doing like that. So this way we are able to break up all of our code into these different sections and still have it check the sensors. So let's go ahead, we'll add in another few steps just that way we have a bit longer program to work with. So I added in counter equals 0, counter equals 1, counter equals 2, and counter equals 3. So now we have these 4 steps that it'll go through, and between each one of them, it'll check to see if it's if the button's pressed. But now the question is, what if we had something that we need to wait for? Like what if we're waiting for a sensor value to equal something in between here? Like we want to drive forward until a different button is pressed, and then we'll go on to the next step. To do that, if we were to stick a typical while loop in here, like while whatever, if we'd stick that in here, we'd get stuck right here, and we wouldn't be checking the button very frequently. So we don't want to do that. What instead we'll do is we'll use the fact that this is inside a while loop, so it'll continually get run over and over again. So what we'll do is we'll have this part of our code right here be the part of the code that we want to repeat. And then rather than immediately after we run it, changing counter, we'll put an if statement on it. So it'll be like, if something, then we will increase our counter. So in the case of, we want to see if there's some in front of us. So we want to see if we bump into something in front of us. So we don't go on to counter equals 3 until we bump into something. So we can do it like this, because with the if statement, it won't get stuck in this part of the code. But we'll instead check, nope, button's not pressed, don't change counter, counter is still equal to 2, check the button, loop around, go to counter equals 2, run the code, check if it's pressed. So it'll go through like that, and then this way we can constantly be checking to see if this button is pressed to know if we need to stop. So it's kind of meant to be like a kill switch of you press it and you want it to immediately stop no matter what's happening. So doing it in this way, we're able to make sure that that can happen. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys learned a lot about how to make your robot go through a list step by step. If you guys have more questions about it, please leave a comment down below and we'll try to get back to you. Thank you guys for watching and have a great day.